Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are fundamentally rethinking how human connection actually works. We usually think of our friends and contacts as just taking up static memory slots in our brains, kind of like contacts in a phone. But what if they don't? What if, instead, our relationships are governed by a dynamic, thermodynamic energy budget? It's a completely fascinating premise, so we're going to jump right in and unpack exactly how this works. To wrap our heads around this Anthrocybernetics version 2 framework, we're going to break it down into 6 quick steps. First, the relational energy budget. Then, the relationship oscillator model. Third, mapping the Cascade Hexgrid. Fourth, the fungal network analog. Fifth, the evidence tier system. And finally, number 6, the daily energy protocol.
All right, let's dive into part 1, the relational energy budget. So, think about this for a second. Is there an actual limit to how many friends you can have? For years and years, science basically told us, yeah, absolutely. We were told there was a strict cognitive limit to our social circles, meaning our brains were only big enough to handle a set number of meaningful connections before the whole system just overloaded. You've probably heard of that old way of thinking. It's called Dunbar's number. It's this idea that we have a fixed limit of around 150 relationships, tied directly to the physical size of our neocortex. Well, scratch that. The new Anthrocybernetics V2 model replaces that rigid number with what they call a thermodynamic ceiling. The really crucial takeaway for us here is that your capacity for connection shrinks or expands based on your available energy, not the size of your brain. So if you're going through burnout, a really tough life transition, or grief, your ceiling naturally shrinks. But if you're well-rested, fulfilled, and just thriving, it expands. Relationships are open systems, and they require a continuous feed of energy to stay alive.
Which brings us to step 2, the relationship oscillator model. So how do we actually measure or quantify a relationship? Well, we're going to borrow a little bit of physics here, specifically damped harmonic oscillators. It is wild how perfectly these 4 physics parameters map onto everyday human relationships. First, you have omega, which is frequency. That's simply your tempo, or how often you actually interact with someone. Then there is amplitude, the magnitude, which translates to the depth of your vulnerability and disclosure. Next is phi, or phase, which is all about your synchrony and rhythm alignment when you're together. And finally, zeta is the damping ratio, representing your conflict repair capacity, basically your resilience. Let's zoom in on that last one for a second, damping, or zeta. In the physics world, damping is how fast an oscillation settles back down after a disturbance. In the relationship world, this is essentially how quickly you and a friend recover from an argument or even just a long time apart. High resonance over time actually lowers your damping. Think about that childhood best friend you haven't texted in like 6 months, but the absolute second you call them, you pick up right where you left off. Because the repair capacity, that resilience, is so incredibly strong, that relationship requires far less energy and way lower frequency to survive. Moving right along to section 3, mapping the Cascade Hexgrid. Okay, this is where it gets really fun, because the abstract math turns into a beautiful, tangible map called the Cascade Hexgrid. It's a canonical 127 hex map, organized into 7 rings that grow radially outward. Right there, dead in the center, is the R0 hex. And that represents you. You are the sovereign observer. You aren't a relationship to be managed. You are the irreducible core that all of your connections radiate out from. Now, every single hex around you lives in a specific ring, and each ring is locked to a specific tempo, or omega. Check out how this progression works. It's pretty fascinating. Way out on the edge at R6 is the current. Those are people you interact with on an hourly basis. But as you move all the way inward to R1, your inner circle, the tempo actually drops to yearly. I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive, but it's brilliant. Stronger relationships actually promote inward to lower frequencies. Because their damping ratio is so low, they don't require exhausting hourly maintenance to stay deeply coherent and connected. And to keep track of the state of every relationship, the system uses 5 little currencies. You've got hearts to track explicit resonance, stars for category matches, like sharing a profession or a hobby. Moons are complementary gaps. Balloons measure passive ambient presence, like silently liking an Instagram story or just watching someone's updates without actually talking. But the absolute most important currency for our thermodynamic model is the hourglass. Hourglasses act as your running energy ledger. It is the critical, unforgiving tally of the relational energy you have spent versus the energy you've received.
All right, section 4, the fungal network analog. To really grasp how information and energy flow through a complex map like our hexgrid, let's look at a real-world biological equivalent, the Wood Wide Web. Common mycorrhizal networks are this continuous, biologically active fungal medium down in the soil that connects living organisms. It turns out, human relational networks perfectly mirror this Tier 1, peer-reviewed ecological phenomenon. The information actually flows through the connections themselves. Just listen to this quote from a 2013 Ecology Letters paper. Underground signals carried through common mycelial networks warn neighboring plants of aphid attack. I mean, think about that for a second. The signal carrying a specific threat warning moves through the physical fungal network, not through the air. Information and memory are routing through a physical network entirely without a central brain. When we look at this mycelial topology, we see that plants actually build larger, more extensive networks for their kin compared to strangers. The network passes electrical spike trains and defense signals. This absolutely proves that memory lives in the topology itself, in the actual physical shape of the connections. It's exactly like the human Cascade Hexgrid we mapped out earlier. The structure of your network is the memory. It literally holds the history of your interactions. Next up, number 5, the evidence tier system. Now, I know what you might be thinking. When a framework gets this expansive, it's really easy to veer right off a cliff into pseudoscience. That's why Anthrocybernetics uses this brutal honesty frame. The creators boldly and explicitly separate their claims. They put hard, peer-reviewed science like bioelectricity, soft inheritance, and fungal networks firmly in Tier 1. Then they put the highly speculative theories like sovereign intent altering the cosmos over in Tier 3. By doing this, they build immense trust with us. They make it crystal clear that when they say energy budget, energy is a functional metaphor for tracking human effort, not some literal, mystical life force you can measure in a test tube. And finally, Section 6, the Daily Energy Protocol. So how do we actually apply this to take back our capacity? Enter the Daily Energy Protocol, better known as the Daily 3. It's super simple. Step 1, take just 3 minutes a day to check in. Step 2, write down one number for your available energy and one number for total energy spent. Step 3, make one single decision to reassess a relationship's ring placement. This little operating layer is incredibly powerful because it forces you to face the raw math of your hourglass ledger. You just can't pretend you have infinite capacity anymore. As you start tracking this, you're going to notice you probably fall into one of 4 diagnostic patterns. You might be a saturator, maximizing every single drop of connection. You could be an investor, smartly placing energy where repair capacity drops and resonance builds over time. Maybe you're an overdrawer, constantly people-pleasing and spending way more than your thermodynamic ceiling actually allows. Or you might be a throttler, artificially limiting your connections out of fear or avoidance. Being honest and identifying your pattern is the very first step to smartly investing your relational capacity. Which leaves us with this final, kind of uncomfortable thought. We've seen that your capacity isn't just a fixed number of memory slots in your brain. It is a dynamic, thermodynamic energy budget. So, if your relational energy is truly finite, who is currently bankrupting your ledger? It might just be time to pull out your own cascade map and make some adjustments. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.